How money works. The Great Corporate Extinction, 13-minute video. Apparently, I'm featured in this video.
2023 saw a record number of new businesses being created here in America.
I hope he's gonna cover this, and maybe he will, but just to be so clear, this is DoorDash, Airbnb, and Uber. Well, if you start a solopreneur Uber driving business, you create a small business so you can write all your expenses off on your taxes. But it doesn't mean that you're building a new business. This spike post-COVID is not like a sudden wave of entrepreneurship. This is people doing more gig work. Is that legal? Yeah, it's totally fine. You know, I have a business for streaming, right? Like I'm a one-person job. I guess I have 8-ish and a team, but for a while it's just me, right? And it's a one-person LLC. Yeah, you make a business. If you're an Uber driver, you should make a business for it, because then you can pay yourself a salary and have the rest of it. You can use business to deduct it. It's a smart way to do business, but it doesn't mean the economy's thriving.
And yet, there is a problem that you may not have noticed. There just aren't that many companies anymore. In 1996, the market hit an all-time record of 8,090 companies publicly listed on the various stock markets around America.
Bro, you Zoomers never know about the 90s, dude. The thriving 90s. The 90s were great. Millennials, we can say it. We can proudly say it. The 90s were fire, dude. Thriving middle class, budget surplus for America, tech felt like it was gonna better our lives and not steal all of our attention and leave us sad and lonely. It was great, dude.
Time is almost up for Bed Bath & Beyond, filing for bankruptcy protection and liquidating hundreds of stores.
I'm sorry. Buy the dip. I didn't want to move on without telling you that if you don't take this opportunity now to buy the dip on Bed Bath & Beyond, you are missing your chance at generational wealth. BBB is due for a comeback. I have been hodling. I took all my Nvidia stock, sold that weak shit. I put it into BBB, and I've been hodling. Here's the thing. Is so far we've seen the beds and we've seen the baths, but what they're waiting for in 25 and 26 is to really show you the beyond. And that's when the stock is gonna moon, dude. That's when we're gonna start seeing real profits. You can't buy it on the exchange anymore, so like, just send me money. Send me money and I'll give you some of my shares. I have so many.
We still see tons of opportunity to change and grow the business quite a lot.
These 7 companies have risen and risen until they've become basically all of the stock market.
At the time this video was released,
dude, I'm so happy that my lawyers have something to do. I'm so happy that I get to sue how money works and show them how the legal system works. When you steal my voice uncredited without permission, that's cash in my pocket. I'm taking the channel. No, that's cool. I appreciate the shout out. I also like that, nice to hear the Glarketer making a cameo. And then How Money Works responded and said, quote, glizzy, glizzy, glizzy. I worked at NVIDIA. I am friends with Ludwig. No end quote. Big A. I didn't recall myself saying those words specifically, but clearly they're in the weeds. Clearly they aren't just a casual viewer here. They know the deep lore about my fingers.
So in less than a decade, the market concentration within the biggest companies has tripled. Even if there were more companies that the public could invest in, they would matter a whole lot less. This trend is bad for investors, bad for workers, bad for consumers, and strangely, it's actually even bad for the companies themselves.
Just straight up, been saying. I don't know how long I've been saying, but I've been saying. I don't know who's been watching here for a few years, but I've been saying, dude. I've been saying like as much as you can possibly been saying.
According to the investment data firm Preqin, the amount of money that private equity firms are now managing in America alone is up 1,200% since the year 2000.
You know, private equity is get a bunch of rich people money, buy a company that's generating cash flow, load that company up with debt, pay that money back to yourself, siphon it off, leave the shell of a company to die. At best, private equity, you know, some of them have like a formula, something simple they can do. Here's the idea. There's a lot of local dentists in America that make money. What if we buy dozens of these dentists? We buy 40 dentists at once. 40 private dentist businesses, and we roll them all up, and we have them on the same HR system, the same payroll system, the same scheduling system. We use one for all of them, so it's a cost saving. Well, there, we've managed to save money. But that's why when you go to a local dentist, instead of getting like a receptionist that is like happy to be there, it's like a tablet that is linked up to a system that has 50 other dentists. This is like the best example of private equity being more efficient or whatever. And the worst example is them like just running it into the ground and siphoning it for cash. But the best example is that they think, okay, we can buy these businesses and make them somehow more efficient. And it's generally by applying some mass back end. Old folks homes is a great example. Old folks homes are cash cows. They buy up a ton of them. And then generally, especially if you're in an area where you don't have competition, like if there's only one old folks home in a large radius, you buy that up and you just degrade the quality. Some of this private equity behavior, it's like the mindset that some of you have on that is like, wow, it's so fucking evil. And it is evil, don't get me wrong, but that it's evil, but like they're just doing it for the money. And what's funny is most private equity firms are stupid and they're not making money off it. It would be a loss. If they weren't propped up by the opaque financial system, artificially low interest rates, the free money system of government Wall Street makes it easy for them to do this for a long time, even if it's not actually working. Because I think on a deeper level, your brain should understand that like Toys R Us made money. So buying it and running it out of business is not profitable. Like they find ways to make it work, but that's not what they're doing actually should fail. There's only certain quirks that you could easily fix that would make them just lose. I just think we have a lot of like moral hazard in the system that allows really stupid ideas to do far better than they should because of infinite access to capital.
According to records from Apollo, one of the biggest private equity firms in the world, the number of companies financed by private equity increased by over 9,000 since the turn of the millennium.
I want to drill that because this is what I've been saying, and I want to specific. The whole point of private equity is that you buy a business and somehow you, because you're the smart elite private equity guy, can make the business worth more. You can do something to it with your superior management knowledge to make it better. But in reality, they can't often do that. And so many times, many of these private equity companies are sitting around unable to be sold because they've made them dog shit. So they can't actually flip the company. Like for a while they could because money was so free. But in this higher interest rate environment we're in right now, there's a crisis brewing in private equity and private credit and all of these areas where, there's no buyers. You've taken this company that was shitty, you've made it worse, you can't flip it. And this problem is brewing. I don't know when it explodes. I don't know, but I just know that this is happening, when this is unfolding. But private equity is facing a reckoning. And so what they're doing, like all industries in America, is when you see a structural problem that's going to fail, try to get as big as possible so you can qualify for a bailout. Like if you're doing something risky and stupid and you know it's going to fail, the solution isn't to cut back on your risk. That just means you're going to be saddled with your bad choices in the past. You go bigger. You double the risk. You triple the risk. You try to get as many people involved. You try to get pensions invested in your risk. You need to make it systemic so that the taxpayer can be on the hook. That is the real flaw in private equity.
According to public 13G filings, the top shareholder of Delta, Southwest, United, and American Airlines is the Vanguard Group, which owns millions of shares in each company, primarily on behalf of their clients through its index products. Collectively, American, Delta, Southwest, and United control more than 70% of the market for air travel within America, according to the commercial aviation data firm AOG. Individually, the best way for these companies to grow their business would be to take market share from one of the other three by offering lower prices, better service, or more convenient routes.
Yeah.
This is the basis of good, healthy competition. But when their largest shareholders also own an equal stake in every other business in the market, they are a little bit less keen on crushing their opposition. If Delta pushed hard against United on all of their routes, then they might take market share from them. But for their shareholders, all they have done is cut into the profit margins to win a war against themselves.
It's true that like collective ownership of every competitor, which is what we do through our 401ks and passive investing, makes companies less competitive. Because if I own 50 shares of Delta and 50 shares of United, then if Delta does well at United's expense, I'm netting even. In fact, I might even be losing money. So, I kind of want them to all just collude, if anything. The Maroon 5 singer? No, that's Adam Levine. Doesn't it require a small active investor pool to balance the system? No, it requires a large active investor pool. Passive investing worked super well when it was small share of total trades. You're just piggybacking on everyone else doing the work. But now that passive investing is like over half of the market, then the smartest active investors just copy the passive, okay? If the passive robot is buying Tesla, Amazon, Apple, Google, Nvidia every week with everyone's 401ks, then those stocks will outperform. And so the active investor just copies, because if not, they'll fall behind. You end up with a thing where the entire incentive for everyone, passive and active, is to pile into the same companies until it's disastrous. It starts to break down when it's that big a slice of the pie.
As new technologies emerge, lots of businesses try to get into the market, and naturally only a few survive.
Sure.
Even the very first international corporations, the Dutch, British, and French East India companies, were effectively just state-sanctioned monopolies because that was the only way they would work. The difference now is that instead of raising money and starting a new business from scratch to take advantage of a new marketable technology, existing businesses just use their own cash to do it in-house. Netflix is the only major player in the streaming market that wasn't already a film studio or major technology company before getting into streaming.
Yep, true.
And outside of digital media, the lesson is the same.
To be clear though, they're all winning. I mean, it's worth noting that like all these tech companies and studios that tried to do something that wasn't their core competency, they've done poorly. And Netflix is winning and profitable. So there's something to that. There's something to like not overstretching.
In theory, lots of venture capital activity should encourage lots of new business development. But the industry has realized that's not the best way to maximize returns. The best way to make money is to instead scale a business really quickly in the hopes that the big tech companies will just acquire it. A paper published by the Journal of Information, Economics and Policy found that this process systematically stifled genuine innovation because businesses were funded to be sold, not to actually provide value to the market. The problem is if...
Yeah, I mean, this is like the guy that Nikita Beer, dude. He founded the same app 3 times and just sold it to different tech companies. He sold to Discord and to Facebook, and I forget what the third one is, but it's the same app. And all 3 times, it failed after they bought it. That's actually so fire.
The existing company with huge cash reserves can compete with the fledgling startup until they have run out of cash and then go back to business as usual. This creates what the economists affectionately branded kill zones, where startups find it really hard to find investors once they threaten the existing big businesses. The most laughably ironic thing about all of this is that yes, businesses with more market power are bad for consumers, who they have more price control over, and even worse for employees who may only have 1 or 2 companies where they can get a job with their skills.
I mean, this is just, I'm not trying to be reductive here. It's complex thought and there's different solutions, but one that has worked in American history and one that I think was trying to be worked on by Lena Khan is just non-rubber stamp antitrust enforcement. If you just challenge some of these buyouts and it suddenly becomes obvious that as a big corporation, you can't just outsource your innovation to the small companies you're going to buy out. I think people have this idea that big companies will always win, when historically, big companies are the slow-moving, lumbering, anti-innovation, backwards giants that lose. They often are bad, but the problem is the rules have been changed to where anyone threatening them, they can just buy out or kill using other methods, and that distorts the whole system. I think there's a good argument to make that historically, the bigger a company gets, the worse it gets, and the more easy it is to beat in the market if you are allowed to compete fairly. It's not like there's a massive advantage. It's sort of the out of competition stuff, the meta game around the game of product versus product. I think a great example, someone said video game companies, and that's a great example where that's a market that is somewhat functioning. That is a market where competition still exists and it's working. And you'll see that like size is not helping these companies. Sony can throw $100 million at Concord or the studio that made Suicide Squad, or the money and the scale and the size gives them no advantage. The product is worse. They're getting beaten by single-person devs. Indies are crushing them. What's that game, Repo? Repo is a 1-person developer. That game is crushing like every AAA title this year. That's real competition. But in a lot of industries, we don't have that. We don't have like a level playing field where the small business can compete. They just can get snapped up. Oh, Schedule 1 was 1 person. Repo's a small team. You're right. But both those games are crushing. Fun video. Thanks for including me. Well, I don't know if it's fun in that it's a little dystopian, but it's interesting.